We begin with verse 1. On one occasion, when Jesus was going to the house of a leader of the Pharisees to eat a meal on the Sabbath, they were watching him closely. When Jesus noticed how the guests chose the places of honor, he told them a parable. He said, "When you are invited by someone to a wedding banquet, do not sit down at the place of honor, in case someone more distinguished than you has been invited by your host. And the host who invited both of you may come and say to you, 'Give this person your place,' and then in disgrace you would start to take the lowest place. But when you are invited, go and sit down at the lowest place, so that when your host comes, he may say to you, 'Friend, move up higher.' Then you will be honored in the presence of all who sit at the table with you. For all who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted." Jesus said also to the one who had invited him, "When you give a lunch or a dinner, do not invite your friends or your brothers or your relatives or your rich neighbors, in case they may then invite you in return and you would be repaid. But when you give a banquet, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, and the blind, and you will be blessed because they cannot repay you. For you will be repaid at the resurrection of the righteous." Friends, the grass withers and the flower fades, but the word of our Lord endures forever. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Henry Rowland was a professor of physics at Johns Hopkins University. And at one point in his career, he was called to be an expert witness in a courtroom trial. During his cross-examination, the other lawyer demanded of him, "Just what are your qualifications as an expert witness in this case?" The normally modest and retiring professor replied very quietly but very firmly, "I am the greatest living expert on the subject under discussion." Later, a friend who was well acquainted with Rowland's disposition shared with him his great surprise at this uncharacteristic answer. Rowland responded to his friend, "Well, what did you expect me to say? I was, after all, under oath." Well, perhaps in that case, his confidence was well warranted. But friends, haven't we found ourselves in situations when that's not quite true? Haven't we found ourselves in situations when we have seen someone, or maybe it's been us, greatly inflating our own importance? Or heaven forbid, when we find ourselves sitting in a situation where we cannot stop talking about how great we are and how wonderful our own abilities are, even when we know it's probably not the best plan? Those times when, instead of honestly taking stock of who we are, what we're actually capable of, or what it is that we deserve, we throw out all evidence to the contrary and insist that when it comes to whatever the topic may be, there is simply no one better than us. This is the situation that Jesus is observing today in the Gospel of Luke. Jesus has accepted an invitation to the home of one of the leaders of the Pharisees to share a meal with him and some other guests on the Sabbath. And as the reading begins, there's this little tiny throwaway set of words at the end of that first verse that they, the Pharisees, were watching him, Jesus, very closely. Now, in case you're not sure, they weren't watching him to learn, right? They were watching him to challenge and to see what kind of trouble he'd get into. So the smart thing for Jesus in this case would have been to just accept the invitation, go to dinner, shut his mouth, stay out of trouble, follow the customs, obey the rules, and just let things unfold however they were going to unfold. But this, we know, friends, is not how Jesus usually acts, yes? So Jesus watches things unfold, and maybe he was silent for, 5 minutes. But at some point in this process. He's watching this custom, and he's had enough. As each new guest arrives, and there begins a whole nother round of folks jostling for position around the table as the people arrive who think they are more important than everybody else, so they take these places of honor at the table, and then sometimes they have to make other guests get up and move and go down the table so that they can have their place, and sometimes they have to move themselves, and Jesus doesn't like what's unfolding. So he offers his expert opinion. And he starts, friends, with what seems like simple advice on how to behave at a dinner party. But soon it becomes very clear that Jesus is actually making a powerful observation about our faith, about our relationships with God, about the way we are called to behave together as the family of Christ. And this works out really perfectly for us, that this particular reading falls on the first Sunday of a new month, because as Jesus is talking about behavior at a dinner party, guess what? We are preparing for our own little dinner party around the Lord's table. So maybe there's something for us about how we come to the table, about how we receive the gift of bread and cup today and every other time we gather. So let's talk about the first part of what Jesus has to say. Jesus has a message for us, right? For the people that are coming to the party, for the people who are gathering around the table, for we who have been invited to share in this gracious feast that Christ has prepared for us. We are here today because God has invited us. But the question I feel Jesus is asking us, friends, is what kind of mindset is it that we're bringing to the table? How is it that we come to this moment? What is our attitude? What is our state of mind? What is in our hearts? Do we come, and we'd never admit this, right? Scouting the competition? Maybe looking around the church this morning and saying, well, it's a good thing I'm here today because I've got it more together than this person. I don't want to point at anybody. Knowing that while we're certainly not perfect, we're at least, I think, maybe a little closer than the one at the end of our pew. Maybe we ought to have a moment where we lead the charge to the table. Maybe we should be at the front of the line because everybody notices the one who's first, yes? Now, hopefully, ushers, we didn't just mess up communion because nobody wants to be first in line now. And we may never admit this, right? Or we wouldn't say it out loud, but I wonder if there's times we've felt like the expert witness in the courtroom when it comes to the things of faith, where we think we are the greatest living experts on how to be Christian men and women when we meet people who are clearly a bigger mess than us, and we think, I'm doing all right. I am not nearly as bad as that guy or that girl. Maybe I have this faith thing figured out pretty well, or at least better than them. If we've ever found ourselves there, friends, then Jesus stands before us today, our host at a feast he has prepared, and tells us that perhaps it's time to remove ourselves from the spotlight. Because Jesus is clear that God is not pleased, God is not honored when God's people jostle for position around his table. Because when those thoughts are in our minds or those feelings in our hearts that we somehow are more deserving than others, then we find ourselves in a place where we are sadly mistaken. And frankly, we become kind of trapped in a very dangerous way of thinking and living. Because Jesus' message is clear. That if we think we are putting ourselves in the places of honor, then we may be more than a little shocked and embarrassed to find that we have put ourselves in someone else's seat. But Jesus doesn't end there. He goes on with another part of his message, seems to be a message to the host of the party about who he has chosen to invite to this dinner. And of course, when we're talking about the Lord's table, when we're talking about sharing bread and cup, our host is who? Our host is who? Don't be afraid. God, excellent. Don't fall asleep on me yet. Because God is the one who invites us to this time and place, yes? God invites us to share this bread, to share this cup. So what then can we learn about God? Most powerfully, friends, we learn that God does not invite us because we can repay God. Instead, Jesus says, God invites the poor, the crippled, the lame, the broken, the undeserving, all the people who are not perfect, but who are tragically flawed. And that is great news, I know for me, and I think for all of us, because that means God invites who? Us. God invites us knowing that we can do absolutely nothing in return to earn our place. God invites us knowing fully well that there is nothing we may give, there is nothing we may say, there is nothing we may do to make ourselves worthy of a place at God's table. God invites us simply because God is gracious, God is merciful, and God loves us that much. But sometimes we get caught up in the routine of it all. We get caught up in that routine of gathering on the first Sunday of the month. We're going to break the bread. We're going to share the cup. And we forget how truly necessary this meal is. Not only for understanding who God is, but for knowing who we are. And for recognizing the vitality of our relationships with Jesus Christ. Today, friends, before we take that step forward to the table, may we first step back in humility, so God may show us those places where our own importance has become a stumbling block for faith, those places that we think we're more deserving than others of the things of God that are ours in this place. Because the truth, friends, is that there's not one person who is speaking or hearing this message today who has done or ever will do enough to deserve what God has given in Jesus Christ. In fact, when we start to believe that we deserve what is ours in this place, or that we've earned God's grace, or that we've done enough to demand it, then we deny our very need for that grace. We're telling God that we don't need what God has to offer, that we don't need what Jesus Christ has done for us, that we don't need the things of God that God longs to give us, because when we know that there is nothing that entitles us to anything, there's no quality or status that makes us deserving of this invitation God gives, then we are at a humble place that makes us ready to grow in faith. So today, friends, is an invitation to humility. An invitation to trust and rely not on the things we bring, but on the God who meets us with everything that we could ever imagine needing or wanting. The God that is more than enough for us. Because in our humility, it's when we hear that invitation with clear eyes and hearts and minds and spirits, God standing before us and saying, "Come and join me. You are my guest of honor." We don't have to worry about where on this table we're supposed to sit, because God puts us all, friends, at the front of the line. This is the meal that we cannot wait to attend. Because what happens at this table through bread broken and cup poured out is an amazing gift that can only be given by a God who is amazing beyond our wildest imaginations and loving beyond our wildest dreams. William Beebe was a naturalist who used to tell a story about spending time with Teddy Roosevelt at Sagamore Hill. After an evening of talk, he writes, the two would go out on the front lawn and they'd search the skies for a certain spot of star-like light in the night sky, right near the lower left-hand corner of the great square of Pegasus. Then Roosevelt would look over at his friend and say, "That, my friend, is the spiral galaxy in Andromeda. It is as large as our Milky Way. It is one of hundreds of millions of galaxies. It consists of 100 million suns, each larger than our sun." Then Roosevelt would grin, look over at his friend, and say, "Now, my friend, I think we are small enough. Let's go to bed." Friends, we are small, but we are made great by the love of God, the grace of Jesus Christ, and the power of the Holy Spirit at work within us. But to be made great, first, we have to remember that we are small on our own. First, we have to be made humble. Where are the places in our lives, friends, where we depend on ourselves, or on our own abilities, or on our own importance, rather than humbling ourselves before God? Where are the places we exalt ourselves above others, or we feel entitled to something of the things of faith? Where are the places where we have failed to humbly accept our smallness and instead surrender to the greatness of God? Before we come to the table today, may we first commit to finding those places in our lives and laying them at the foot of the cross where they belong. Because, friends, it is only in letting go of ourselves and living in humility that God may exalt us and make us the people and the family of faith that God intends for us to be, trusting not in our own understanding, but instead falling helplessly into the arms of a God who loves us so much that he freely gives his one and only Son and raises him to everlasting life, so that we too may have the gift of life eternal. For these many gifts, friends, but most of all, for the gift of coming to this table in humility, knowing that we may do nothing at all, but still God will do everything. Let us give thanks to our God. Amen.